Haman got so mad at Mordecai, he was going to kill all the Jews, and that wasn't enough. His wife gave him an interesting suggestion. She said, well, why don't you build a great big gallows 75 feet high? And you can hang Haman from the gallows. Well, you know the story. Esther asked for the king, her husband, to spare her people, the Jews. And the king said, who in the world is this who would do such a thing as this? And she said, the adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman. We'll get into this part of the story later on. The king is angry and he stands up and he leaves. And Haman falls down at the couch where Esther is reclining at the banquet to beg mercy of her. The king comes back in and it looks to him like Haman's trying to force his attentions on the queen. And he said, well, he forced the queen in her own room? The Bible says, while he was speaking the words, they covered Haman's head. In other words, everybody knew, okay, this guy's cooked. And somebody said, Your Majesty, you might just want to know that Haman had built a gallows 75 feet high. He was going to hang Mordecai on him. The king said, what a great idea. You hang Haman from the same gallows where he intended to hang his adversary. How to hang yourself. Go back to chapter 3, if you would please, verses 8 and 9. Haman said unto the king Ahasuerus, there is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of thy kingdom, and their laws are diverse from all people. These people are weird. They're not like anybody else. Never heard of people like them. And neither keep they the king's laws. That was a lie. Therefore, it is not for the king's profit to suffer them. If it please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed. And I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those that have the charge of the king's business to bring it into the king's treasures. Haman says, these people are terrible. They're ruining your kingdom. They got these weird laws and they don't obey any of your laws, and they're causing all kind of trouble. And not only that, if you let me wipe them all out, I'll take from their possessions 10,000 talents of silver, and you can put it in the king's treasures. Now, it is true that the Jews had different laws than King Ahasuerus did. It's true. They worshiped the God of Israel. They didn't worship a pagan god. They had their worship on the Sabbath day. They observed dietary laws. That's true. That was not true that they were a damage to the king. As a matter of fact, Esther makes it clear later on that if the king had allowed Haman's order to be fully carried out, he would have lost money. Because he would have lost all the taxes from all those prosperous, diligent, successful Jews that had become a part of his kingdom. And she said the enemy could not countervail the king's damages. No matter how much money he gave you, it wouldn't be as good as much as what you're going to lose. So here's the fifth way to hang yourself. Lose objectivity about your adversaries. The tale that Haman told was that these people were causing all kinds of trouble and you'd just be better off without them. But the truth is that they were not a hindrance. They were a help. Do you know one of the reasons that the Jews have had opposition and attack so often throughout history? Now some of it's satanic because they're God's chosen people and the devil hates God and he's against anything that the Lord is for. But another one of the reasons is the Jews have often been successful. Not everyone. There were poor Jews that lived in the ghettos in Germany and other places, Russia, places like that. But by and large, do you know that people who obey God's laws and God's principles tend to be more successful than people who don't? They tend to work harder. They tend to be honest. They tend to be diligent. The Bible's all full of good advice for your life. The Bible says if you're a sluggard, you don't plow because it's cold out and then you're going to come to harvest time and have nothing. The Bible says the hand of the diligent maketh the rule, bringeth him to a ruling place. The Bible tells you all kind about work. It said in all labor there is profit. And so the truth is these people that Haman said were bad were really good. Lose objectivity about your adversaries. I want you right now to think about some people you like least. Or how about this? Think about people who don't like you. Aren't they wonderful? Aren't you glad God has brought them into your life? Think about somebody who's criticized you, somebody who has attacked you, somebody who has been negative to you. Could you stand up and tell me a bunch of good stuff about that person? Here's what we do. We tend to judge people entirely by how they treat us. So somebody can be a jerk to the whole world and nice to you, and you think they're a good guy. And somebody could be nice to the whole world and not nice to you, and you think they're a bad guy. I am often reminded of my inability to perceive accurately everybody's attitude, behavior, value. I think overall I'm a better judge of persons than average, but man, I get it wrong a lot. Yesterday I preached in Liberal, Kansas, Friday night and Saturday morning. Liberal, Kansas is 3 hours from the nearest expressway. It is beautiful. If you're from Kansas, you know it's like just lovely flat land. Tumbleweeds and windy. Southwest Kansas. They say Liberal is where Dorothy was from in The Wizard of Oz. I don't know how they figured it out. There's a place down there called Dorothy's House. I did a breakout session for the pastors and full-time workers, and there was a man in that section, and he had been to a meeting I'd preached in that church a year or so ago, and I'd spoken with him, and I knew that he had had some questions about things, and I thought we'd had a good conversation, but then I realized he didn't quite agree with me on everything, and I'd been asked to do a particular session by the pastor, and so I did the topic the pastor asked me to do for the other preachers that were there, and I watched him, and he was sitting in the back, and I thought, he doesn't like this. Oh, he's not agreeing with me. Yep, he's unhappy. He's probably gone further down the wrong road. I didn't say anything to anybody about it. Didn't say anything to him about it. Didn't see him to speak to him. I got home. The plane landed at 11 last night, which was the new midnight. And I got in the kitchen. Chrissy came down. I spoke with her for a moment. And then I looked at my phone. I got a text from that guy. He said, Brother Willett, this is so-and-so. I have your number because you gave it to me a little over a year ago when you were here in Liberal. He said, I just wanted to thank you for your messages today. They were a blessing. And he said, they were a help to my man, and you know what a blessing that is. Yeah, I had him pegged, didn't I? Lose objectivity about your adversaries. Some of you, unfortunately, have turned your spouse or your parents into an adversary. And in your mind, you think that they're the enemy. The devil loves to have children think their parents are the enemies, because if he can get you kids fighting your parent, then he can come in and mess with you and you don't even fight him at all. I just got a little thought for you. Your parent or your enemies usually don't provide you 3 meals a day. Your enemies usually don't give you housing. They usually don't give you clothing. They usually don't buy you birthday presents, Christmas presents, Easter eggs. They usually don't take out someplace to a restaurant every once in a while. They usually don't pay your tuition in a Christian school. No, the devil is your enemy, not your parents. But if he can get you thinking that way, what happens is in your mind you go over all the negative things, whether it's your parents or your spouse or your boss or some bad neighbor, and you're just always thinking all the terrible things about that person. And so when your mind, in the screen, the computer screen in your mind, it writes wife, husband, parents, neighbor, boom, all this bad stuff pops up right away. Because that's what you've been thinking about them. Is that all that's true about them? Let me ask you, that person you're upset with, do they get along with people at work? Do they have friends that like them? Are there neighbors and acquaintances and relatives that enjoy their company? Then maybe, just maybe, they're not as bad as you think they are. I have a few biases in my life. One of my biases is against rich people who try to use their money to throw their weight around. I'm not against rich people. But I'm against rich people think because they have money they can get you to do what they want you to do. Sam Davison had a man come into his church, and the man was giving $1,000 or $2,000 a week. think it was a couple $1,000s a week. And the treasurer said, Brother Davidson, you're doing this, it's really good. And Brother Davidson went to visit the man, and the man said, are you aware of what I've been placing in the offering? Brother Davidson said, yes, somebody told me about that. He said, now that will continue. There's only one thing I'm asking of you. You're going to have to change the way you do the Lord's Supper. And Brother Davidson probably was more kind than I would have been. He said, well, I'm sorry, I can't do that. And I'm thinking, what a jerk. Thinks because he's got a couple grand a week to put in the offering, he can tell a man of God how to obey the Word of God and how to conduct his church. I would have a Bible verse for that man. My Bible verse would be, go out and hang yourself. Go jump in a lake. I had a friend who, a man had told him that he was already pretty wealthy, but he was going to get real wealthy. He had some business deal, and once it was done, he was going to have a lot of money. And so my friend is in a position where he could use the money for the ministry, and he talked to the guy, and he explained to him his philosophy, and he talked about what the man wanted to do with the money, and he took him places. And one day my friend called me up, and he said, look, I've done this, this, and this, and really nothing's happened yet. And he said, what do you think I should do? I said, I'm the wrong man to ask. I said, I have never gone to anybody to ask for money. They have these fundraising campaigns, and one of the ways they do it in the churches, the John Maxwell organizations and those guys, they'll go to the wealthy people and they'll tell them how much money they need them to give. And they call those legacy givers, and they say people, they'll love having been approached and treated individually, and you're going to get all this kind of money from them. I don't do that. I stand up and tell everybody what we're doing, and God tells you what to do, and I hope you obey Him. And I said, I'm probably the wrong guy to ask. I said, I'm the freest man in America. I don't have any big ministries like that I got to finance. I just pastor a church. And I said, my attitude to him is that there's some people that are kind of attracted to what they see as the celebrity status of the work of God, and they want to be around the big players and stuff. And I said, my attitude is you've already got money. If you want to give money, give something now. You can give 10 grand or 20 grand or 50 grand. You don't have to wait until you get this big chunk of money coming in. I said, my attitude to him is, why don't you do what you're going to do and stop playing my friend? I said, I'm the wrong guy to ask. So there's a wealthy man. And he's given lots and lots of money to the work of God, and a lot of it to one particular ministry. And he wasn't happy with how things were being done, so he didn't give the money for a while. And then he said, now I will help this ministry, but you have to let me become essentially your CEO. I'll run all the business affairs for you. And somebody told me about it, and I said, they ought to tell him to go jump in a lake. I'm getting more moderate in my old age, and I want him to hang himself, just go jump in a lake. And I thought, what a jerk, because he's got money. You know, people, some of my friends, I don't think they're bad people, but they'll give these people a speaking opportunity and put them in front of a crowd because they got money. Nobody cared what they had to say if they were the same wealth level as you and I are. Having money doesn't qualify you to tell everybody else how to live. It may qualify them to tell you how to get money. And I thought, what a jerk. It's really what I thought. So then I'm preaching somewhere, and they said, hey, this rich guy, he's going to come to the meeting tonight. I said, oh, that's fine. And they said, he'll probably go out to dinner with us. Wonderful. How excited I am to be with him. And I didn't say much. I just said, well, you know, if that's what you want to do, that's fine. I'll be kind to him, but I'm not real interested in that. And I didn't have a great opinion of the guy. And the man I was preaching for said, oh, really? Why, he said, you know, the other day the man wanted to ask me some questions. We went out with him and his pastor. He said he was very interested in learning. He received the truth I had. Why, he said, I know the church he attends, and they've never had a bit of trouble with him. He's been nothing but a blessing. He never tried to run anything there. Now, this man was not my adversary, but I didn't like what I thought was the type of person he was. And maybe all the things I thought were true, but they weren't all the truth there was about him. And the fact of the matter is that it's hard for you and I to be objective about those who oppose us. And maybe it'd be a good idea to think about the people that you don't like or that don't like you and that are giving you a hard time, and think about what's good about them. What do they do that's positive? What do they do that you admire? What do they do that you appreciate? And maybe if you do that a little bit, maybe it'd be okay if they didn't like you, but they still loved others. You want to hang yourself? Lose objectivity about your adversaries. You want to hang yourself? Here's a good one. Be sure to do this. Lie to get your way. Lie to get your way. I could not tell you how many times somebody has brought me a negative report about someone else that proved to be completely unfounded because they wanted to diminish that person. They wanted to demean that person. They wanted to marginalize that person. They wanted me to like them better than that other person. But I wonder how often you and I have been in the middle of some kind of conversation and we said something about somebody, it really wasn't quite the whole truth. Really didn't completely, honestly, and accurately represent the facts. And Haman says, oh, these people, their laws are diverse from us, and they're going to harm your kingdom, and you'll be much better off without him. Wasn't true. We had a lady in our church years and years ago. I don't think anybody except my wife will know who this was. And she wanted a certain position in our church. And so she came to me and she told me some things about the person who had that position in our church. Oh, they said they really don't like that and they don't want to be there and they're upset about this and they don't like that and they said this and they said, I said, really? So I called the people, the husband and the wife, into my office and I said, I was told you said this, and they said, no. I said, well, did you say this? And they said, no. And I said, what about this? And they said, preacher, we never said anything like that. Now, I won't tell you who the other person was, but the person they lied about was Lori Hintz. Such a troublemaker. Had so much grief from her over these years, but I'm going to be objective and kind about it. And whether they knew they were being deceptive or they just persuaded themselves that something was true because it fit their agenda, that's what they did. Now, you people who are always running somebody down to make yourself feel better and look better and think that they have people think that you're better than that other person, you are going to hang yourself. Lie to get your way. And the seventh thing is this: use your position to advance yourself rather than the cause you serve. Use your position to advance yourself rather than the cause you serve. Why are you here? Our positions are different. I told you this last week, but our job's all the same. Our job is to serve God. What is it? Our job is to serve God. Everybody's job is to serve God. That's why I'm here. I'm here to serve God. But sometimes I get along the way and I'm thinking about what I can get out of this and how I can use this to my advantage and how I can manipulate that particular circumstance to help me. I knew a preacher. He's not preaching anymore. I mentioned him to you earlier in this series, the guy with the BMW 7 Series and the Z3 and the grenade launcher guns and the $1 million house on the golf course and the $1.5 million house near the church. And I don't mind it when God's people have stuff. I'm grateful when they do, and I'm happy for them. But I told you I couldn't find the spiritual connection with this guy, and I didn't go back when he wanted me to go back and preach there again. You know, when he left that church, his mortgage on his house was up to date. His mortgage on his place on the golf course was up to date. His BMW payments on both cars were up to date. And the church was 6 months behind on its mortgage payment. 6 months behind. My good friend, Brother John Wilkerson, just became pastor of First Baptist Church of Hammond. If you want a wonderful experience, go to YouTube and put in John Wilkerson, QAM. and A. The Ampersand sign, Q and A. Marvelous. I told some about it. So they called Brother Wilkerson. And they said, Brother Wilkerson, one secretary said, we've gotten you a car. We're going to get you a Ford Flex. And Brother Wilkerson said, no, you're not. No, you're not. Well, they said, he said, you don't get me a car when you're behind on the bills. He said, you got lease cars that you leased for some of the staff members that have been laid off before I got there. I'll drive one of those. And he said, I'm going to stop having those leases for everybody too. And they showed him some houses that are out in the rural area, a bunch of them, and a couple of houses nearer the church. And he said, no, I want you to reverse your parameters. Show me more houses nearer the church. He said, I live 20 blocks from the church in Long Beach. I'd like to be about the same distance in Hammond. He's paying about half for the house in Hammond. What he sold for or will likely sell his house for in California. Could have bought twice as good a house if he wanted to. But Brother Wilkerson, he did the same thing when we went to Long Beach. He took some of the money they were giving the preacher and gave it to some of the assistants because he thought he could live on less money, and those guys were barely getting by. And the reason that First Baptist Long Beach, when he went there, was almost $1 million in debt, and he didn't know about it before he got there, and now it's out of debt and stable and doing well, is because John Wilkerson didn't go there to get something for himself. He went there to do something for God. But I don't want to work in that ministry because I get in late. Go ahead. Use the position God gives you to advance yourself. You know, I found out along the way, if you let God take care of you, He does a better job of it than you do yourself. I know of preachers that manipulate things, and they get somebody to tell somebody what they want and what kind of celebrations they want and how they want to be treated, and they call that training the staff. And I may be bad at it, but I don't do that. I'm glad I get to serve God. I'm glad I get to proclaim the gospel. I'm glad I get to preach. I'm glad that God uses me. I think of all the things the Lord allows me to do, and I often think how unworthy I am of that and how grateful I am for that and what a blessing it is to serve God. And I'll promise you, there's no fancy car. There's no big house. There is no tremendous trip. There is no perk or benefit that is anywhere equivalent to knowing that you're used of God. Make it about yourself instead of others if you'd like to hang yourself. Well, Heavenly Father, I pray that these thoughts